Subscribe now and press the bell icon so you never miss an emotional story that touches your heart. The morning sun painted the palace walls in shades of gold as Marcus stood at his post. His uniform was perfectly pressed, his boots shined to mirror quality, and his expression remained as neutral as it had been for the past 15 years. Marcus was not just any guard. He was the royal guard who stood at the eastern entrance, the silent protector who had witnessed countless ceremonies, celebrations, and secret whispers that floated through the palace corridors. People often walked past him without a second glance. To them, he was simply part of the scenery, as permanent and unchanging as the marble columns that supported the grand archways. Children would sometimes stare at him, wondering if he was real or simply a very convincing statue. Marcus never broke his stance, never smiled, never acknowledged the world around him except when duty demanded it. This particular morning felt different, though Marcus could not explain why. The air carried a strange tension, like the moment before thunder rolls across the sky. He had learned to trust these feelings over the years. His instincts had saved lives before, including the young prince during an assassination attempt 3 years ago. That event had earned him respect among his fellow guards, but Marcus never spoke of it. He simply did his job. At exactly 9 o'clock, a small figure appeared at the palace gates. She was a girl, no more than 8 years old, with tangled brown hair and clothes that had seen better days. Her shoes were worn through at the toes, and she carried a small bundle wrapped in faded cloth. The other guards at the main gate had turned her away twice already that week. But something made her keep returning. She walked slowly toward the eastern entrance, where Marcus stood. Her steps were hesitant, and her eyes kept darting around as if she expected someone to chase her away at any moment. When she finally stood before Marcus, she looked up at him with eyes that held more sadness than any child should carry. She did not speak at first. She simply stood there, clutching her bundle tightly against her chest. Marcus remained perfectly still, his gaze fixed forward as protocol demanded. The girl waited for several minutes, shifting her weight from one foot to the other. Finally, she spoke in a voice barely louder than a whisper. "Please," she said, "I need to see the Queen. It is very important." Marcus had heard similar requests hundreds of times before. Everyone wanted to see the Queen. They wanted favors, money, jobs, or simply a moment of her time to tell her about their problems. The answer was always the same. No unauthorized visitors. No exceptions. That was the rule. But something about this girl made Marcus pause internally, though his exterior remained unchanged. Perhaps it was the way she held that bundle, as if it contained something more precious than gold. Perhaps it was the desperation in her eyes, mixed with a strange kind of hope that refused to die despite obvious hardship. "The Queen does not accept visitors without appointment," Marcus should have said. That was the standard response. But instead, he did something he had never done before in 15 years of service. He looked down at the girl. Just for a moment. Just long enough for their eyes to meet in that brief connection. Marcus saw something that made his heart contract painfully in his chest. He saw his own daughter, who had died of fever 5 years ago. She had been about this age when illness took her. The resemblance was not physical, but something deeper. Something in the way hope and despair fought for control in those young eyes. The girl seemed to sense the change in him, small as it was. She took a tiny step forward. "My mother is sick," she whispered. "The doctors say she will die without medicine, but we have no money. I heard the Queen is kind. I heard she helps people. Please, sir." "I just need someone to listen." Marcus knew the rules. He had followed them without question for 15 years. He had turned away hundreds of people, many with stories just as desperate. The palace could not help everyone. Resources were limited. There were proper channels for requesting aid. A guard's job was to protect, not to solve every problem that appeared at the gates. But in that moment, standing in the golden morning light with this small girl looking up at him, with her mother's last hope reflected in her eyes, Marcus made a decision that would change everything. He gave a single, slight nod. It was barely noticeable, just a small movement of his head that could have been mistaken for nothing at all. The girl's eyes widened. She had not expected any response, let alone acknowledgement. Marcus remained still for another moment, then did something even more unexpected. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small card. It was his personal identification card, the one that allowed him access to restricted areas of the palace. On the back, he quickly wrote something with a pen he kept for logging his reports. He held the card down low, where passing guards would not easily notice, and the girl took it with trembling hands. On the back, Marcus had written an address. It was not the Queen's address. It was something potentially more useful. It was the address of the royal physician's private clinic, along with a simple message written in Marcus's neat handwriting. The bearer needs help. Send bill to Royal Guard Marcus, Eastern Post. Emergency case. The girl looked at the card, then back up at Marcus. Tears were forming in her eyes, but she blinked them back fiercely. She opened her mouth to say thank you. But Marcus had already returned to his rigid stance, eyes forward, expression neutral. To anyone watching, it would appear that nothing had happened. The girl stood there for a moment longer, clutching the card as if it were a magical talisman, then turned and ran back through the palace grounds toward the gates. Marcus watched her go from the corner of his eye. He knew what he had done was against regulations. He knew he might face consequences if discovered. His salary was modest, and the medical bills would likely consume months of his earnings. His wife would worry about their finances. But somehow none of that seemed to matter. What Marcus did not know, as he stood there in the morning sun resuming his endless watch, was that his simple act of kindness had set in motion a series of events that would reach far beyond one sick mother and her desperate daughter. The ripples of that single nod would spread outward in ways he could never have imagined, touching lives in the palace and beyond, ultimately changing not just his own fate, but the fate of everyone around him. 3 days passed before Marcus heard anything about the girl. He continued his duties as always, standing at his post from dawn until dusk, watching the world move around him while he remained still as stone. His fellow guards noticed nothing different about him. His captain saw no change in his performance. But inside, Marcus felt different. He checked his mail each evening, expecting a bill from the royal physician's clinic, preparing himself to explain to his wife why their savings would be taking such a significant hit. On the 4th day, something unusual happened. A messenger arrived at the eastern entrance carrying a sealed letter marked with the royal physician's official stamp. Marcus accepted it with steady hands, though his heart was beating faster than normal. He waited until his afternoon break to open it in private, away from curious eyes. The letter was not a bill. Instead, it contained a brief note from Dr. Helena, the royal physician herself. She wrote that a young girl had appeared at her clinic with his card and that she had examined the girl's mother personally. The woman was indeed gravely ill, suffering from a lung infection that had gone untreated for too long. Dr. Helena had admitted her to the clinic immediately and begun treatment. But the letter's final paragraph made Marcus read it twice, to be certain he understood correctly. The girl mentioned that a royal guard had helped her, Dr. Helena wrote. When I asked which guard, she said it was the one who never moves, the one everyone calls the statue. I realized she meant you, Marcus. I have known you for many years through palace functions, and I have always respected your dedication. I want you to know that I will not be sending you a bill. Instead, I am paying for the woman's treatment myself. Your kindness inspired me to do the same. Sometimes we forget why we chose our professions. You reminded me that healing is not just about medicine, but about compassion. Thank you for that reminder. Marcus folded the letter carefully and placed it in his pocket. He felt a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with the afternoon sun. He returned to his post and resumed his duties, but something had shifted inside him. The endless hours of standing guard no longer felt quite as heavy. The isolation no longer seemed as complete. He had made a difference, even if it was just for one person. A week later, the girl returned. She approached Marcus's post with much more confidence than before, though she still moved quietly and respectfully. This time she wore cleaner clothes, and her hair was neatly braided. She stopped a respectful distance from Marcus and looked up at him with shining eyes. My mother is getting better, she said softly. The doctor says she will live. I came to say thank you. Marcus did not move. He could not while on duty. but his eyes softened just slightly, and the girl seemed to understand. She smiled, a real smile that transformed her entire face, then reached into her pocket and pulled out something small. It was a simple bracelet woven from colored threads, the kind children make with their own hands. She placed it carefully on the ground near Marcus's feet, then stepped back. "I made this for you," she said. "I know you probably cannot wear it, but I wanted you to have something for me. You saved my mother's life. You saved my life too, because I do not know what I would do without her. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much." She gave a small, awkward bow, then turned and walked away. Marcus watched her go, this girl whose name he still did not know, and felt something crack in the armor he had built around his heart over 15 years of service. After his daughter's death, he had closed himself off from feeling too much. It was easier to be a statue, to exist without emotion, to simply perform his duty without letting the world affect him. But this girl had reached through that barrier with her simple gratitude and reminded him what it felt like to be human. When his shift ended that evening, Marcus bent down and picked up the bracelet. He held it carefully, examining the careful weaving, the bright colors, the love that had gone into its creation. He tucked it safely into his pocket and carried it home. His wife Sarah noticed the change in him immediately. After 15 years of marriage, she could read his moods even when his face showed nothing. That night, over dinner, Marcus told her everything. He told her about the girl, the card, the doctor's letter, and the bracelet. Sarah listened without interrupting, her expression shifting from concern to understanding to pride. "You did the right thing," she said when he finished. "I know money is tight, and I know you were worried about the cost. But you followed your heart, and look what happened. You helped save a life, and in doing so, you reminded a doctor why she became a healer. That is worth more than any amount of money." Marcus reached across the table and took his wife's hand. "I kept thinking about Emma," he admitted, speaking his daughter's name aloud for the first time in months. "That girl reminded me so much of her. I could not just turn her away." Sarah squeezed his hand, tears glistening in her eyes. "Emma would be proud of you," she whispered. "I am proud of you." That night, Marcus slept better than he had in years. He dreamed of his daughter, but for once, it was not a sad dream. In it, Emma was smiling and playing in a garden full of flowers, and when she saw him, she ran over and hugged him tight. When he woke, the grief that had lived in his chest for 5 years felt just a little bit lighter. The following week brought unexpected visitors to the eastern entrance. Dr. Helena herself appeared, accompanied by 2 of her medical students. She stopped in front of Marcus and looked up at him with warm, intelligent eyes. "Guard Marcus," she said formally, though her tone was friendly. "I wanted to inform you personally that your patient has made a full recovery and will be discharged from the clinic tomorrow. She asked me to thank the guard who helped her daughter, though she does not know your name. I thought you would want to know that your kindness had such a positive outcome." Marcus gave the smallest nod of acknowledgement, the only response protocol allowed while on duty. Dr. Helena smiled, understanding the limitations he worked under. "I also wanted you to know," she continued, "that your actions have inspired me to start a new program at the clinic. I am setting up a fund to help those who cannot afford medical treatment. I am calling it the Compassion Fund, and it exists because one guard chose to help one desperate child. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness create the biggest changes. Thank you for reminding me of that." She gave a respectful nod and departed with her students, leaving Marcus to process what she had said. His single moment of compassion, his one broken rule, had led to something larger than himself. A fund that would help countless others. Lives saved because he had chosen to see a desperate child instead of just another person asking for favors. The weight of that realization settled over him like a warm blanket. His simple nod had created ripples that were still spreading outward, touching lives he would never meet, making differences he would never fully know about. And somehow, standing there in his uniform at his post, Marcus felt more connected to the world than he had in years. 2 months passed, and life returned to its normal rhythm. Marcus continued his duties at the eastern entrance, standing watch day after day with the same discipline he had always shown. The bracelet the girl had made him stayed in a small box on his bedside table, a private reminder of what kindness could accomplish. He thought about her sometimes, wondering if her mother had truly recovered. Hoping they were both doing well, the palace was preparing for the annual Autumn Festival, a grand celebration that drew nobles and commoners alike from across the kingdom. The guards worked extra hours, security was doubled, and the entire staff buzzed with activity. Marcus found himself assigned to extended shifts, standing watch during the festival preparations and the event itself. He did not mind. The work kept him busy, and he had always found comfort in routine. On the morning of the festival, the palace grounds were transformed into a wonderland of colors and sounds. Banners hung from every wall, musicians practiced their performances, and the smell of cooking food drifted from dozens of festival stalls. The queen herself would be making an appearance, greeting her people and participating in various ceremonies throughout the day. It was the kind of event that required every guard to be at their absolute best. Marcus took his position at the eastern entrance, now serving as one of the checkpoints for festival attendees entering the palace grounds. His job was to observe the crowds, watch for suspicious behavior, and ensure that no one brought weapons or harmful items into the celebration. It was demanding work that required constant alertness, despite his motionless appearance. The crowds began. Arriving mid-morning, families with excited children, elderly couples walking slowly, arm in arm, groups of young people laughing and chatting. Marcus watched them all with practiced eyes, noting everything while appearing to notice nothing. Hours passed in this way, the sun climbing higher in the sky, the sounds of celebration growing louder and more joyful. Then, during the early afternoon, Marcus noticed something that made his blood run cold. A man was moving through the crowd with purpose, his eyes scanning the area in a way that felt wrong. He wore common clothes, but underneath his loose jacket, Marcus spotted the outline of something that might be a weapon. The man's movements were too calculated, too focused. He was not here to celebrate. Marcus could not leave his post. But he caught the eye of a roaming patrol guard and gave a subtle signal they had been trained to recognize. The patrol guard nodded slightly and began moving toward the suspicious man, trying to appear casual while closing the distance. Marcus continued watching, his muscles tensing beneath his perfectly still exterior. The suspicious man seemed to sense attention on him. His eyes darted around, and his hand moved toward his jacket. Marcus knew in that instant that something terrible was about to happen. Time seemed to slow down as training and instinct took over. The man was reaching for whatever was hidden beneath his jacket, his gaze fixed on a point beyond the crowd where the queen would soon be passing. Marcus broke protocol. He stepped away from his post and moved quickly through the crowd, his heightened uniform causing people to step aside automatically. The patrol guard saw him moving and understood immediately that this was serious. Together, they converged on the suspicious man just as he pulled a blade from beneath his jacket. What happened next occurred in seconds but felt like hours. Marcus reached the man first, his hand closing around the man's wrist before the blade could be fully drawn. The patrol guard grabbed the man's other arm, and together they wrestled him to the ground. The crowd around them erupted in screams and confusion, people scrambling away from the confrontation. More guards appeared within moments, surrounding the scene and establishing order. The blade fell from the man's hand, clattering onto the stone pathway. It was long and wickedly sharp, clearly meant to do serious harm. As additional guards secured the attacker, Marcus and the patrol guard stepped back, breathing hard from the sudden exertion. The captain of the guard arrived moments later, quickly assessing the situation and taking command. The festival was temporarily halted. While the attacker was taken into custody and the area was secured, the queen, who had been mere minutes away from passing through that exact spot, was safely escorted to a protected location. An investigation began immediately. Marcus and the patrol guard were both questioned extensively about what they had seen and how they had identified the threat. It turned out that the attacker was part of a group that opposed the crowns. Recent reforms to help the poor? They had planned to make a violent statement during the festival, choosing the most public moment possible to strike. Thanks to Marcus's vigilance and quick action, the plot had been stopped before anyone was hurt. The blade had been poisoned. If it had struck the queen or anyone else, they would have died within minutes. By evening, word of what happened had spread throughout the palace. Marcus expected to be commended for his actions, but he also worried about having abandoned his post, even if it was to prevent an assassination. He had broken protocol twice now in a matter of months. First with the girl, and now by leaving his assigned position. He wondered if his career as a royal guard was about to come to an end. The next morning, Marcus was summoned to the throne room. His captain accompanied him, wearing an expression that revealed nothing. As they walked through the grand corridors, Marcus prepared himself for whatever judgment awaited. He regretted nothing. He had done what needed to be done both times. If that cost him his position, so be it. The throne room was less crowded than Marcus had expected. The queen sat on her throne, looking regal and composed despite yesterday's danger. Beside her stood several advisors and the head of the royal guard. Dr. Helena was also present, which surprised Marcus. What could she have to do with this? Marcus and his captain approached the throne and bowed deeply. The queen gestured for them to rise and look at her. Her eyes, wise and kind, studied Marcus for a long moment before she spoke. "Guard Marcus," she said, her voice clear and strong. "Yesterday you broke protocol by leaving your assigned post. This is normally a serious offense that would result in disciplinary action. However, in doing so, you prevented an assassination attempt and likely saved many lives, including my own. I am told that you identified the threat through careful observation and acted without hesitation when action was required. This is precisely the kind of judgment and courage we value in our royal guard." She paused, and Marcus held his breath, unsure where this was leading. "I have also learned," the queen continued, "about another incident 2 months ago, an incident involving a young girl seeking help for her sick mother. Dr. Helena has informed me that you gave this child your personal identification. Cardin took financial responsibility for medical treatment. Despite the fact that helping unauthorized visitors is against regulations, is this true?" Marcus swallowed hard. "Yes, Your Majesty. It is true." The queen's expression did not change. "And why did you do this? Why risk your position and your finances for a stranger?" Marcus thought carefully before answering. "Your Majesty, I saw a child who needed help. I saw desperation and hope fighting in her eyes. I could not turn her away. My duty is to protect people, and in that moment, helping her felt like the right kind of protection." The queen was silent for several seconds, studying Marcus with an intensity that made him want to look away. But he kept his eyes respectfully on her face. Finally, she smiled. It was a small smile, but genuine and warm. "Guard Marcus," she said, "you have shown me something important. You have shown me that true service is not about blindly following rules, but about understanding when compassion and quick thinking must take precedence. You have reminded me why I implemented reforms to help our people, and why guards like you are essential to this kingdom. You see people, not just threats or problems. That is rare and valuable." Marcus felt relief flood through him, though he kept his expression neutral. The queen was not finished speaking. The queen rose from her throne and descended the steps until she stood directly in front of Marcus. This close, he could see the wisdom in her eyes, the strength that had guided the kingdom through difficult times, and something else he had not expected to see. Gratitude. Real, genuine gratitude. "I am promoting you," the queen announced, her voice carrying through the throne room. "You will no longer stand at the eastern entrance. Instead, you will serve as my personal guard, part of my inner security detail. This position requires not just physical courage, but moral courage. The ability to make difficult decisions when rules and compassion conflict. You have proven you possess both kinds of courage." Marcus could hardly believe what he was hearing. The position of personal guard to the queen was one of the highest honors in the royal guard. Only a handful of guards ever achieved such a rank. It came with increased responsibility, better pay, and the queen's direct trust. He had spent 15 years at the eastern entrance, never expecting advancement, content to serve in whatever capacity was needed. Now, because he had followed his heart twice, his entire life was changing. "Your Majesty," Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion, "I am honored beyond words. I will serve you with everything I have." The queen nodded. "I know you will. That is why I chose you. You may return to your current duties for the remainder of this week. Your new assignment begins next Monday. Dismissed. Marcus bowed deeply and left the throne room with his captain, who clapped him on the shoulder once they were out of earshot. Well done, Marcus. Well done indeed. You deserve this. The news of Marcus's promotion spread quickly through the palace. His fellow guards congratulated him, some with genuine happiness, others with barely concealed envy. Marcus accepted both reactions with grace. He understood that not everyone would be pleased to see someone who had broken rules being rewarded, but he also understood that the queen saw something in him that others might not recognize. That evening, Sarah cried, tears of joy when Marcus told her about the promotion. I always knew you were special, she said, hugging him tightly. I always knew your kindness and your strength would be recognized someday. Emma would be so proud. Marcus held his wife close, feeling blessed beyond measure. In helping one desperate child, he had not only saved a life, but had also discovered something essential about himself. He had learned that true service meant seeing people as individuals, not just as rules or procedures to be followed. That lesson had changed everything. His final week at the eastern entrance felt strange. Marcus stood at his familiar post, but he was no longer quite the same guard who had stood there for 15 years. He was still disciplined and alert, but there was a new warmth in him, connection to the people passing by that had not existed before. He noticed things he had missed for years. The way a father held his young son's hand, the laughter of friends meeting after a long separation, the quiet dignity of an old woman making her slow way through the palace grounds. On his last day at the eastern entrance, Marcus received an unexpected visitor. The girl appeared in the afternoon, now accompanied by a woman who walked with a slight limp but otherwise appeared healthy and strong. This was clearly her mother, recovered from her illness. They approached Marcus together, the girl holding her mother's hand tightly. Sir, the girl said, her voice stronger and more confident than before, this is my mother. Her name is Catherine. We came to thank you properly. Catherine stepped forward and looked up at Marcus with tears in her eyes. I understand you are the guard who helped my daughter when we had nowhere else to turn. You gave her your identification card and took responsibility for my medical bills. You saved my life, and in doing so, you saved my daughter from becoming an orphan. I can never repay you for that kindness. Marcus wanted to tell them about Dr. Helena paying the bills, about the compassion fund that now helped others, about how their situation had created something larger than any of them had anticipated. But he was on duty, required to maintain his post and his silence. Instead, he did something he had never done while in uniform. He smiled. Just a small smile, but genuine and warm. The girl understood. She smiled back, that bright smile that transformed her entire face. We heard you were being promoted, she said. We heard you were going to be the Queen's personal guard. That is wonderful. You deserve it. They stayed for only a few moments longer, respecting his duties, then departed with final words of gratitude. Marcus watched them walk away together, mother and daughter, alive and healthy, because he had chosen compassion over protocol. It was a memory he knew he would carry with him for the rest of his life. Monday morning arrived, bringing with it Marcus's first day in his new position. He reported to a different part of the palace, where the Queen's personal security team gathered for their daily briefing. There were 12 guards in total, each one selected for their exceptional skills and judgment. They regarded Marcus with curiosity and some skepticism. He was the newest member of this elite group, and he would need to prove himself worthy of the position. The head of the Queen's security, a stern man named Commander Philip, gave Marcus his initial instructions. You will be responsible for the Queen's safety during her daily activities within the palace. You will accompany her to meetings, meals, and any other functions she attends. Your position will be at her right side, close enough to respond to any threat immediately, but not so close as to be intrusive. The Queen values her personal space. Respect it while remaining vigilant. Understand? Marcus nodded. Yes, Commander. I understand. His first day was intense. Marcus stood beside the Queen as she met with advisors, discussed kingdom business, signed documents, and made decisions that affected thousands of lives. He observed her carefully, learning her patterns. Cumming her rhythms, becoming attuned to her needs without being told. The queen moved with grace and purpose, her mind sharp and her compassion evident in every decision she made. During a break between meetings, the queen turned to Marcus and spoke quietly. "You are doing well. I can see you watching, learning, adapting. That is good. I want you to understand something, Marcus. I did not choose you only because you saved my life at the festival. I chose you because of what you did for that child. Anyone can react to immediate danger. That takes training and courage, which many possess. But seeing a desperate person and choosing to help them, even when rules say you should not, that takes a different kind of courage. That takes heart. I need guards who have both courage and heart. Do you understand?" Marcus felt a lump form in his throat. "Yes, Your Majesty, I understand." The queen smiled at him. "Good. I have been told you lost a daughter several years ago. I am sorry for your loss. I suspect that loss taught you something about the value of each individual life, about how precious and fragile our time here is. That understanding makes you a better guard because you know exactly what you are protecting." She was right, of course. Emma's death had broken something in Marcus, but it had also opened his eyes to truths he might never have seen otherwise. Every person mattered. Every life had value. Every moment was precious. These were not just philosophical ideas, but lived experiences that shaped how he saw the world. The weeks turned into months, and Marcus settled into his new role. He proved himself capable and trustworthy, earning the respect of his fellow guards and the queen's continued confidence. His life had transformed completely from those days standing motionless at the eastern entrance. He was no longer a statue. He was no longer isolated from the world around him. He was engaged, present, and connected to something larger than himself. 6 months after his promotion, Marcus accompanied the queen on a visit to the newly expanded medical clinic. Dr. Helena's Compassion Fund had grown significantly, supported by donations from nobles who had been inspired by the story of one guard's kindness. The fund now helped dozens of families each month, providing medical care to those who could not afford it otherwise. The queen wanted to see the clinic's expansion and meet some of the people. Being helped as they walked through the clinic's bright, clean halls, Dr. Helena explained the various programs they had implemented. Marcus listened with interest, proud to have played even a small part in creating this place of healing. Then Dr. Helena led them to a special room where several families waited to meet the queen. These were people whose lives had been saved by the Compassion Fund, and they wanted to express their gratitude. Among the families was one that made Marcus's heart skip a beat. Catherine and her daughter sat together on a bench, looking nervous but excited. When they saw Marcus enter with the queen, the girl's face lit up with recognition and joy. Catherine stood quickly, smoothing her simple but clean dress. The queen spoke with each family individually, listening to their stories with genuine interest and compassion. When she reached Catherine and her daughter, Dr. Helena made the introductions. "Your Majesty, this is Catherine and her daughter, Anna. They were the very first family helped through the Compassion Fund. Catherine had a severe lung infection that would have been fatal without treatment. Her daughter sought help from guard Marcus, who gave her his identification card and took responsibility for the medical costs. That single act of kindness inspired the creation of the entire fund." The queen looked at Marcus with raised eyebrows. "This is the family? The girl you helped?" Marcus nodded. "Yes, Your Majesty." The queen turned her attention to Anna, who looked up at her with wide eyes full of awe. "So you are the brave young girl who kept returning to the palace gates seeking help for your mother. Tell me, were you frightened?" Anna nodded shyly. "Yes, Your Majesty. The other guards kept sending me away, and I thought no one would ever listen. But then I went to the eastern entrance, and guard Marcus was there. He did not send me away. He helped me even though he did not have to. He saved my mother's life." The queen smiled warmly. "He certainly did. And in doing so, he reminded all of us about the importance of compassion and quick action. Your persistence and his kindness have helped create something that now serves many people. You should both be very proud." Catherine spoke up, her voice trembling slightly. Your Majesty, I work as a seamstress now that I have recovered. I am not wealthy, but I make enough to support my daughter and myself. If there is ever anything I can do to repay the kindness that was shown to us, I would be honored to serve in any capacity." The Queen considered this for a moment, then smiled. "Actually, Catherine, there is something. The palace employs several seamstresses, and I understand we have an opening in that department. If you are interested, I would be happy to offer you a position. The work is steady, the pay is fair, and you would be contributing your skills to the palace staff." Catherine's eyes filled with tears. "Your Majesty, I would be honored." "Thank you. Thank you so much." Anna hugged her mother tightly, both of them crying tears of happiness and relief. Marcus felt his own eyes growing damp as he watched this scene unfold. What had begun with a simple nod had grown into something beyond anything he could have imagined. A woman's life saved, a medical fund created, and now a family brought into the security and stability of palace employment. The ripples of that one moment of compassion were still spreading outward, touching more lives than he could count after the clinic visit. As they returned to the palace in the royal carriage, the Queen spoke to Marcus quietly. "Do you see now why I value what you did? You saw a person in need and helped without thinking about the consequences to yourself. That kind of selfless compassion is rare, Marcus. It is also contagious. Your kindness inspired Dr. Helena to create the Compassion Fund. The fund inspired nobles to donate. Those donations are now saving lives every day. And today, we were able to offer stable employment to a woman who was once days away from death. All of this exists because you chose to help one desperate child." Marcus felt humbled by her words. "Your Majesty, I only did what felt right in that moment. I did not plan for any of this." The Queen laughed softly. "The best acts of kindness are never planned, Marcus. They happen when we listen to our hearts instead of just our heads. That is what makes them genuine. That is what makes them powerful." As spring arrived, bringing warmer weather and blooming flowers to the palace gardens, Marcus found himself reflecting on how much his life had changed in less than a year. He walked through the palace halls with purpose now, no longer confined to a single post, no longer isolated from the world. He had formed friendships with his fellow guards, earned the respect of palace staff, and most importantly, he had reconnected with the part of himself that had died along with his daughter. One afternoon, while the Queen attended a private meeting, Marcus stood outside her chambers alongside another guard named Thomas. Thomas was young, only in his second year of service, and he looked up to Marcus with obvious admiration. During a quiet moment, Thomas spoke hesitantly.
"Sir, may I ask you something?"
Marcus nodded. "Of course." Thomas glanced around to ensure they were alone. "I have heard the story about how you helped that girl and her mother. Everyone talks about it. They say you broke protocol to help a stranger, and instead of being punished, you were promoted. I am curious about something. How did you know it was the right thing to do? How did you know when to follow the rules and when to break them?" It was a thoughtful question, one that Marcus had asked himself many times. He considered his answer carefully before speaking. "Thomas, the rules exist for good reasons. They protect people and maintain order. Most of the time, we should follow them without question. But rules are created by people, and people cannot anticipate every situation. Sometimes you encounter a moment where following the rules would cause harm, or where breaking them might prevent suffering. In those moments, you have to trust your judgment and your heart." Thomas frowned slightly. "But how do you know the difference? What if you are wrong?" Marcus smiled. "You might be wrong. There is always that risk. But I have learned that the greater risk is becoming so rigid in following rules that you stop seeing the people those rules are meant to serve. When I saw that girl standing at my post, desperate and afraid, I had a choice. I could follow protocol and turn her away, or I could help her. I chose to help, accepting whatever consequences might come. I was fortunate that my choice led to good outcomes, but even if it had cost me my position, I would not regret it. Some things are more important than careers." Thomas nodded slowly, absorbing this wisdom. "Thank you, sir. That helps me understand." Their conversation was interrupted by the Queen emerging from her meeting. Marcus and Thomas snapped to attention, and the discussion was set aside. But Marcus could see that his words had made an impact on the young guard. He hoped Thomas would carry that lesson with him throughout his career, though he would remember to balance rules with compassion, duty with humanity. As the months continued to pass, Marcus witnessed the ongoing impact of the Compassion Fund. Dr. Helena regularly updated the Queen on the families, the lives they had saved, the children who would not become orphans because their parents received timely medical care. Each story reinforced what Marcus had learned that day when Anna first approached his post. Small acts of kindness could create enormous changes. One person choosing compassion could inspire dozens, hundreds, even thousands of others to do the same. Catherine proved to be an excellent seamstress, and she quickly became valued among the palace staff. Anna sometimes visited the palace with her mother, and whenever Marcus saw her, she would wave enthusiastically, her face bright with happiness. The transformation from the desperate, ragged child who had first approached him to this confident, joyful young girl was remarkable. Marcus took no credit for it, but he felt grateful to have played a role in making it possible. One evening, as Marcus walked home after his shift, he found himself passing the eastern entrance where he had spent 15 years of his life. The guard currently stationed there stood in the familiar rigid pose, eyes forward, expression neutral. Marcus remembered what it felt like to stand in that exact spot, day after day, year after year. He remembered the isolation, the sense of being invisible, the feeling that he was just part of the scenery rather than a real person. He also remembered the moment everything changed. Anna standing before him, desperate and hopeful, his hand reaching into his pocket for the identification card, the single nod that acknowledged her humanity and her need. That moment had transformed not just her life, but his own. It had reminded him that he was more than just a guard, more than just a statue. He was a human being with the power to make choices, to help others, to create positive change in the world. Marcus continued walking home, his heart full of gratitude for the journey he had been on. When he arrived, Sarah was cooking dinner, and the smell of her food filled their small home with warmth and comfort. He told her about his conversation with Thomas, about seeing Anna at the palace, about the reflections that had occupied his thoughts during his walk home. Sarah listened with the patience and understanding that had sustained their marriage through good times and bad. When he finished, she took his hand and squeezed it gently. "You have become the man Emma always saw in you," she said softly. When she was little, she used to tell people her father was a hero who protected the Queen. We would laugh because you were just a guard at a side entrance, not anyone important. But she was right all along. You were always a hero. You just needed the right moment to show it. Marcus felt tears prick his eyes. He had spent 5 years grieving his daughter, carrying the weight of her loss like a stone in his chest. But lately, that weight had transformed into something different. It was still there, but now it felt more like a warm presence than a crushing burden. Emma lived on in his memories, in the lessons she had taught him about love and joy, and in the way her loss had opened his eyes to the preciousness of every life. He had helped Anna partly because she reminded him of Emma, but in doing so, he had honored his daughter's memory in the most meaningful way possible. A year after his promotion, Palace hosted a grand ceremony to celebrate the anniversary of the Compassion Fund. The event brought together everyone who had played a role in creating and sustaining the fund, from Dr. Helena and her medical staff to the nobles who had donated generously, to the families whose lives had been saved. The Queen herself would be speaking at the ceremony. Marcus was assigned to stand beside her throughout the event. The ceremony took place in the palace's great hall, decorated beautifully with flowers and banners. Hundreds of people filled the space, their conversations creating a gentle hum of excitement and anticipation. Marcus stood at his position near the raised platform where the Queen would speak, his eyes scanning the crowd with practiced vigilance, while also appreciating the joy and hope that radiated from the assembled guests. When the Queen stepped onto the platform, the hall fell silent. She looked out over the crowd with warmth and pride, then began to speak. Her voice carried clearly through the space, reaching every corner of the great hall. 1 year ago, the Queen began. A young girl approached the palace gates seeking help for her dying mother. She had been turned away multiple times, but she refused to give up hope. On her final attempt, She encountered a royal guard who saw her not as a nuisance or a problem, but as a desperate child in need of help. That guard broke protocol to help her, setting in motion a chain of events that has touched countless lives. The Queen paused, her gaze sweeping across the audience. That guard is here today, standing beside me. His name is Marcus, and his simple act of kindness inspired the creation of the Compassion Fund. Because of his courage and compassion, we now have a program that has provided medical care to over 300 families in the past year. 300 families who might otherwise have lost loved ones. 300 stories of hope and healing that exist because one man chose to see a person in need rather than just another rule to follow. The crowd erupted in applause, and Marcus felt his face grow warm. He had not expected to be singled out in this way. The Queen gestured for him to step forward. And though it went against every instinct that had been trained into him over 16 years of service, he obeyed. He moved to stand beside the Queen. Facing the crowd of people whose applause grew even louder, the Queen continued speaking, her hand resting lightly on Marcus's arm. Marcus represents what I hope all of our royal guards will embody. Discipline and courage, yes, but also compassion and wisdom. The ability to know when rules serve the greater good and when they must be set aside in favor of human decency. He has become not just my personal guard, but a symbol of what service truly means. Not blind obedience, but thoughtful dedication to protecting and serving the people of this kingdom. As the applause finally subsided, the Queen invited Dr. Helena to the platform. The physician spoke about the fund's accomplishments, sharing statistics and stories that illustrated its impact. She talked about the lives saved, the families kept together, the children who still had parents because of timely medical intervention. Then she invited several families to share their own stories. Catherine and Anna were among those invited to speak. They climbed the steps to the platform, both looking nervous but determined. Catherine spoke first, her voice shaking slightly, but growing stronger as she continued. "A year ago I was dying," she said simply. "I could barely breathe, and I knew I did not have much time left. My daughter Anna refused to accept this. She went to the palace again and again, seeking help even though she was turned away each time. But on that final day, she found Guard Marcus at the eastern entrance. He saw her, really saw her. And he helped us when no one else would. Because of him, I am alive today. Because of him, my daughter still has a mother. Because of him, we have a home and security and hope for the future. He saved our lives, and we will be grateful to him for the rest of our days." Tana spoke next, her young voice clear and confident. "When I went to the palace that last time, I was so scared. I thought no one would ever help us. But then Marcus looked at me, really looked at me, and I knew he understood. He gave me his card and told me where to go. That simple act of kindness changed everything. Now my mother works at the palace as a seamstress, and I go to school, and we have enough food to eat and a warm place to sleep. All because one guard chose to be kind when he did not have to be. That is what I want to remember about this year. Kindness matters. One person choosing to help can change everything." The applause that followed Anna's words was deafening. Marcus felt tears streaming down his face, no longer caring who saw them or what protocol said about guards showing emotion. These were not tears of sadness, but of overwhelming joy and gratitude. He had helped this family, yes, but they had also helped him. They had reminded him why his work mattered, why service meant more than just following orders, why connecting with others was essential to being fully human. After the ceremony concluded, Marcus found himself surrounded by people wanting to thank him, to shake his hand, to tell him their own stories of how the Compassion Fund had helped them. He listened to each one, genuinely interested in their experiences, honored to have played even a small role in their healing journeys. Hours passed in this way, with Marcus at the center of a grateful crowd, no longer a distant statue, but a living, breathing person who had made a real difference in the world. As the evening drew to a close and the guests began departing, the Queen approached Marcus one final time. They stood together in a quiet corner of the great hall, away from the remaining crowds. "Marcus," the Queen said softly, I want you to understand something. Today was not just about celebrating the Compassion Fund. It was about celebrating what you represent. Throughout history, kingdoms have risen and fallen based on whether those in power remembered to care about individual people. Rules and laws are necessary, but they are not enough. We need people like you who understand that every person matters, that every life has value, that sometimes the greatest service we can provide is simply seeing someone who feels invisible. Marcus listened carefully, honored by her words, but also humbled by them. Your Majesty, I am just one person. I did one small thing. Queen shook her head. No, Marcus. You did not do just one small thing. You created a moment of connection and compassion that rippled outward in ways you still do not fully understand. Because of you, Dr. Helena was inspired to create the Compassion Fund. Because of the fund, nobles were inspired to donate generously. Because of those donations, hundreds of families have been helped. Because those families were helped, their children will grow up with parents and security and hope. Those children will become adults who remember what kindness looks like, and they will pass that lesson on to their own children. You have changed not just one life, but generations of lives. That is the power of choosing compassion. Marcus had never thought about his actions in such expansive terms. He had helped Anna because it felt right in that moment, not because he was thinking about future generations or creating lasting change. But he could see now that the Queen was right. Every act of kindness created ripples that spread far beyond the original moment. Every person who chose compassion inspired others to do the same. He had been part of starting something larger than himself, something that would continue long after he was gone. That night, as Marcus walked home under a sky full of stars, he felt a profound sense of peace. He thought about the journey that had brought him to this moment. The years of standing silent and motionless at the eastern entrance, the loss of his beloved daughter Emma, the grief that had nearly consumed him, the desperate girl who had appeared at his post seeking help, the single nod that had changed everything, his promotion to the Queen's personal guard, the ceremony celebrating the fund he had helped inspire. All of it was connected, each moment leading to the next, creating a story of transformation and hope. When he arrived home, Sarah was waiting up for him. She had attended the ceremony and witnessed everything, including his tears during the speeches. She embraced him tightly without saying a word. And they stood there in their small home, holding each other in the comfortable silence of two people who had weathered storms together and emerged stronger. Finally, Sarah pulled back and looked up at her husband with shining eyes. Emma would be so proud of you. I wish she could have been here to see what you have become. Marcus smiled through fresh tears. I think she knows. Somehow, I think she knows. And I think she is proud, not because of my promotion or the ceremony, but because I finally learned the lesson she tried to teach me when she was alive. She used to say that being kind was the most important thing anyone could do. She understood that, even as a small child. It took me losing her to truly understand what she meant. They stayed up late that night, talking about Emma, about Anna and Catherine, about the Compassion Fund and all the lives it had touched. They talked about the future too, about the legacy they wanted to leave, about how they could continue making a positive difference in whatever time they had left. For the first time in years, neither of them felt weighed down by grief. Instead, they felt hopeful and purposeful, aware that their lives had meaning and that their actions mattered. The months and years that followed brought continued growth and change. The Compassion Fund expanded to include not just medical care, but also job training, education support, and housing assistance for families in need. Marcus continued serving as the Queen's personal guard, earning recognition for his dedication and wisdom. He mentored younger guards, teaching them the same lessons he had learned about balancing duty with compassion, rules with humanity. Several of those guards went on to create their own initiatives to help people in need, inspired by Marcus's example. Anna grew into a bright, compassionate young woman who eventually became a physician herself. Working alongside Dr. Helena at the clinic, she never forgot the guard who had helped her mother, and she made it her mission to help others the way she had been helped. Catherine continued working as a seamstress at the palace, taking pride in her work and in the stable life she could now provide for her daughter. Marcus lived to see the Compassion Fund help thousands of families, each one a testament to what could happen when people chose kindness over convenience, compassion over protocol, love over indifference. He never sought recognition for his role in creating the fund, but recognition found him anyway. He was content with that, knowing that the greatest reward was not praise or promotion, but the knowledge that he had made a real difference in the world. And it all began with a single nod, one moment of connection between a desperate child and a guard who chose to see her as a person rather than a problem. One small act of kindness that created ripples spreading outward across years and generations, touching countless lives in ways both seen and unseen. That was the incredible truth that Marcus carried with him for the rest of his days. That everyone has the power to change the world, one small act of compassion at a time. All they have to do is choose to see the people standing right in front of them and then choose to help.